My name's Christie Harkin. I'm the managing editor at Bitcoin Magazine. Thanks for coming to our conference. It's certainly been a great couple of days so far of talking and meeting everybody. Today's panel is Bitcoin by the numbers and global user adoption. And before I introduce our guests on the panel, I thought I'd throw out a couple of numbers. So as I was sitting backstage, I kind of watched the price of Bitcoin drop a little bit, but we're not too anxious about that because it's just the price anyway. But that number right now, at least 5 minutes ago, was sitting just a shade under 12K at 11,999. Yeah, exactly, by the dip. Market cap, 233 million and change, sitting at 64, almost 65% market dominance for Bitcoin. So that's pretty good. We're at 10,371 Bitcoin nodes online, of which 97% of them are pointed at Bitcoin. They are Bitcoin core nodes. 90% of the interest seems to be still coming from the male audience, but there's a good growing female audience or interest out there, so let's go, girls. And of course, the age, 48%, is young. 25, okay, I'm gonna say young. 25 to 35 years old. So we've got a growing, rising group of people who are going to be carrying the torch of Bitcoin for years to come. We are unrestricted in 115 of 251 countries, and we have 3 excellent guests on our panel today. So I'm going to start with, we've got Dovey. Now, it's Juan or Wan?
Oh, like Dovey Wan, lovely Dovey.
Okay, yes, Wan, right? Okay, so Dovey Wan, founding partner of Primitive Ventures. Leo Weese, who is with the Hong Kong Bitcoin Association, and Spencer Bogart, and who is, well, obviously with a general partner at Blockchain Capital, and long time into crypto with the gang. So I'm going to start, just let you guys just for 2 seconds, tell us who you are, what you do, and then we're going to start in with some questions and maybe something that you really want to talk about first. So actually,
cool.
Dovey, you want to start?
Yeah, hey guys, so my name is Dovey Wan. So I'm founding partner for Primitive Ventures, and we are a global crypto asset holding company. We have offices in San Francisco, Boston, Singapore, and Shanghai. And then specifically for Bitcoin, and so I also manage Hardcore Fund, and so that's a completely non-for-profit, so independent, independent funding resources for any independent full-time Bitcoin developer.
We're the Bitcoin Association of Hong Kong, which is an industry and community group. We started the meetups in 2012 in Hong Kong and have been growing ourselves into a productive and hopefully innovative part of the global Bitcoin community. If you haven't come through Hong Kong, or if you have come through Hong Kong and not found us yet, please do.
And I'm Spencer Bogart. I'm with Blockchain Capital. We're a venture firm. We've invested in somewhere north of 70 different companies in the space, many of which have been presenting today. We invest both in companies and in Bitcoin itself.
Great. And very quick, because this is a huge question, of course, is about Bitcoin adoption, where it's going to come from, what we need, what is like the top thing on your list in terms of where we need to go, what we need to have happening in terms of Bitcoin adoption. I'm going to start with Spencer because he had to go last.
Sure. What do we need? Shockingly, nothing. I think the passage of time. I don't think that there's lots of catalysts that can help drive accelerated adoption, but I think that time is really on our side. The store of value market is gigantic. It's way above and beyond what people normally cite just in the gold market alone. And I think that capital is naturally flowing into it, particularly with the macroeconomy the way it is.
Yeah.
I don't think Bitcoin can succeed as purely being a store of value. I believe the capital that's coming into Bitcoin as a store of value is going to leave as quickly as it might then, as it's entering, and it will enter Bitcoin in the same way as it's entering the art market or the used car market or the Beanie Babies market. I think for Bitcoin to succeed, especially on a global scale, it needs to function as a form of payment, as a medium of exchange. And I think the Bitcoin community is doing very well in sustainably and scalably achieving that. But this also requires a bit our effort, and this requires for us to go out of our way to, even when we only have 0.5% of customers who might have Bitcoin, to actually accept it as payment and to service these customers in the same way that it requires us to then seek out businesses and try out their payments and to actually have Bitcoin on our phone and to try it out to pay for it. Because I think there is a massive demand for better online payments for the world, especially in Asia. We see payment methods like failing quite reliably. I myself, in a relatively privileged situation already in Hong Kong with a bank account, I have trouble paying with a credit card. I have trouble getting cash here. I have trouble getting cash in Korea from the same bank that I bank with in Hong Kong. And Bitcoin can solve all these problems. And Bitcoin can not only solve them, but Bitcoin can make all these products and all this trading commerce a lot better. But yeah, we need to work on that. Sorry.
Okay, Dovey?
Yeah, so I think I probably hold a little bit different opinion than like Leon, because I think that the biggest application for like Bitcoin is basically for like any just like geopolitical tension, and then for like any social unrest, and so like that's where like the money is actually flowing into Bitcoin. And so like internally we have a philosophy or thesis is like long Bitcoin, short the world. Basically just like short any potential chaos, and chaos is the ladder. And so it's the ladder for Bitcoin to the moon. And so basically, based on my past experience, and so like Leon mentioned, like just payment and like medium of exchange. And so I want to point out that digitization of currency is completely different than the actual cryptocurrency or like digital currency. And so China has been cashless for like almost 10 years now. And so many places, like even like government, just like municipal department, and so they actually don't accept cash. And everything is just like WeChat Pay and Alipay. And so like what we have seen, like Facebook like launch out like Libra, so it's actually just like, so it's essentially a American version or like just a Western version Alipay, because on the front end it's a payment processor, like on the back end, so it's basically a SDR, right? So it's like kind of like a money, kind of like a money market fund. So that's exactly what like Alipay is. But like the beauty of like Bitcoin, so from my perspective is, so China bans all these ICO and like cryptocurrency exchanges in 2017, like August, right? And so that actually didn't impact the local trading volume of like Bitcoin at all, because everything immediately moved to OTC. And then so I have seen one very interesting phenomenon that like any government ban or like just all this like regulatory like bottleneck becoming the best PR. And so it has happened for like China for like last few years, and then right now it's in like Iran, and then so it's in India. So like the OTC desk right now for like Iran, like trading at over 10% premium, and then so in like Cuba it's also over 10%. And so I think at the end of the day, so we are in this economic downturn. And so when it comes to economic downturn, especially during like macro credit cycle, and we will see the rise of like populism. And then so populism will actually lead to like very strong-handed like political leader. So the presidency has the exactly version of like to make China great again. Like even basically like the policy and like the motto is exactly the same term. So in the Chinese it's like 实现中华民族的伟大复兴. So if you want to translate that, it's exactly to make China great again, and then just to regain like the past leadership of like past like 5,000 years. And then so like that's why we can see all these like strong-handed leaders so they have like a direct conflict. And so like that's why I see like the entire global economy and just our social system like gonna be more and more chaotic. And then so if we want something that's actually just a meta state or just like above like any sovereign state thing, and so that's what that's actually what Bitcoin is. So like that's what Bitcoin is representing for, and then so it's basically a symbol for like freedom, and because like chaos is an alternative form of like freedom, in my opinion. And then but the thing is like currency itself is a protocol, and so like if we cannot rely on any sovereign state, then like what else we can depend on?
So if you have people or if you have a government that is controlling the digital currency aspect of things,
so like that's like digital fiat.
But not, and I'm talking about a fiat or a Libra version where there's a centralized backing to it. Bitcoin then it has that chance to go beyond the controls. How are people understanding that? Does the average person understand?
So like people understanding that. So it's
that?
like, okay, so it's very simple. Okay, like all the asset class, like back in mainland China, like everything can be manipulated, right? So all the way from currency to stock market to like a housing market, and so like I remember clearly that like in like 2017, like only 1 week like after the ban, and then so like the Bitcoin price actually rallied back, and then so that's a very good just an indicator that like the Bitcoin price itself like does not rely on any like governmental fund, and so like people realize that. So this is something it's a one of the kind asset that will never like influenced by just by any like government just like government policy, and so like there's a clear independent of the correlation of like Bitcoin to many other just like traditional financial asset. And so I think like Spencer has done a lot of like research on that, and then like the other thing is like we are in the generation, so I'm right now 30. And then I remember like Spencer and like Blockchain Capital, so they recently launched a really good survey on like the next generation, like the Gen, like the Gen Z, gonna be so crypto native, and right, so like Spencer probably can like share.
They're half the interest market right now.
So basically like my nephew, and so like he was saying that in the future, if I have my own wealth or like my own asset, I will only hold property that's housing or just anything token. So from my generation, we trade stock on like Robinhood, but like in the future, like crypto and Bitcoin is basically the stock for the next generation.
Right. But Leo, you were saying that one of the keys, though, is going to be making it accessible and understandable and having the tools that people can actually touch and use and make it user-friendly.
Anything is a store of value in China. There is so much money going around, and there's so much money being printed. There's so much money being created in the banking system, in the shadow banking system, that literally anything you invest in is going up in value in the past years. What makes Bitcoin special are, of course, a few things, and a couple of these things are very unique to Bitcoin. For example, that it's the only thing that you can really truly own, and the only thing that you can easily move outside of the country. But for Bitcoin to succeed, or for Bitcoin to properly differentiate itself, for example, from ant farms or from like club memberships, which are equally attractive and rising in value, in price rather, not in value. It needs to become liquid, and it needs to have a kind of a natural demand. And this natural demand cannot come from the greater fool. This natural demand come not from somebody who's like even richer to you, but late in Bitcoin. But this demand has eventually has to come from people who accept this as payments and who use this as money. And yeah, there isn't a lot of, comparatively to what other efforts, for example, among the projects that I've been talking about the last 2 days, there is comparably much less effort going into making this acceptable as money compared to making this more easy to invest in.
So
yeah.
just add on to that, and I think the most important factor for accessibility is actually local liquidity. And so if you go to many of these like developing country, and so they don't have enough local liquidity, and there's no trading infrastructure, and exchanges are not there yet. But I remember this year, early this year, Binance launched their Turkey branch, and so I remember their Turkish branch, right? So right now is actually the highest growth area, and so I think if you have local liquidity, and then especially OTC for fiat on ramp, either P2P or B2P manner, and then so that can largely increase what we consider as accessibility, and because the hard sovereignty of Bitcoin is already the biggest application and the biggest usability out there, and then so there's so much money wants to transfer out from either mainland China or many other sovereign states that's facing social unrest, and so people understand the concept of this is actually a digital trust or digital Swiss bank, and then I myself is the banker, and there's no middleman. So that is the biggest usability, and I have seen the most convincing one. So for many people out there.
Yeah. And now, Spencer, you've said, and along in this similar vein, I'm going to quote yourself back to you, that structurally speaking, the fact that Bitcoin can serve the hardest to serve markets, including the unbanked, means it can serve everyone, and that your precedent for it is the internet. And that we tend to think of the biggest potential catalyst having three primary ingredients: the link between crypto and where crypto resides today, capital resides today rather, a familiar form factor to minimize adoption friction, and a highly engaged international user base. So how does that all fit into that?
Yeah, I mean, so a few things there. One, I think that store of value assets do deliver a tremendous amount of utility for their users. There's some, north of $20 trillion that would agree with that assertion. Again, I mentioned obviously the gold market everybody cites as a $9 trillion market today. The high-end collectibles market is a $4 to $5 trillion market. And then the global real estate market is 150 to 200 trillion. Now, granted, not all real estate is used as a store of value. Much of it is used for consumptive purposes, so people living in their houses, and a lot of it is used for cash flow purposes. But if you look at the microstructure of a lot of metropolitan areas, you can see how much of it is being used as a store of value. If you look at Vancouver, for example, you can see that overseas purchasers have been a significant driver of market appreciation in the Vancouver real estate market over the past few years. Most of those homes are empty. Those are not people that are renting them. Those are not people that are living in them. It's overseas purchasers that are adopting Canada's strong property rights and using it as a store of value. So these things have delivered utility for hundreds of years, and they'll continue to do so. And I think Bitcoin has a lot of superior advantages over traditional store of value assets.
Yeah. Also more ethical. Nobody has to live inside of a Bitcoin.
Say it again, sorry.
Nobody has to live inside of a Bitcoin.
Oh.
Yeah. But there's also the idea of the engaged international user base. Mm-hmm. And beyond the user base, there's also the idea of investment and international investment, and what kind of, and I mean, you all look at projects and invest in projects that are building on or with or reliant on Bitcoin. What are some of the trends that you're seeing in terms of investment potential internationally for Bitcoin businesses, and what are some of the things that are most exciting to you right now?
These people have almost no money to invest. The investment is coming from a very small group of financial institutions and billionaires who are holding their population hostage. And the Bitcoin price going up, or this money going in, is more of a sign of the just lack of imagination of these people, because they've literally invested in anything else. They bought up license plates in the USA by the dozen simply because they read something fancy. And then Bitcoin is just like the last thing. And of course, we believe that Bitcoin has the potential to be like the last bubble, or has the potential to be the bubble to end all bubbles. But for that, it can't just be an investment, because there's going to be the next investment.
And then when we are talking about investment, and then one very important question to ask yourself is, your investment performance is denominated by BTC or by fiat, and so that's a completely different mentality. And so like, because we are more like BTC denomination, and so basically whenever I'm just like meet a new company or like a new project, and I simply will ask myself like, so if I want to invest like 5 million, say for instance, and should I just put the 5 million in Bitcoin itself, right? And because I realized that like over like the course of like past 5 years, and so there's very few companies, so they actually outperform Bitcoin itself. So I think there are probably only 2 companies, also probably 3, Bitmain, so like including Binance, right? So Binance, I'm not sure whether they will like actually be a company. It's like a gigantic net of like different companies. So okay, Coinbase, Binance, like Bitfinex, and then all these exchanges and like trading and just like liquidity infrastructure, and then plus Bitmain. And then so that's pretty much it. And then so if you look at all these companies, and they basically share one common like characteristic, they are actually productive asset based on Bitcoin, right? So they basically can produce more Bitcoin. So exchanges, like, so they're basically like taking transaction fee, and then also like BitMax, and then like BitMax might be the most profitable like Bitcoin company right now because they basically settle everything on like BTC, and then like Bitmain, and like the beauty of like Bitmain and many other like uprising mining company like WhatsMiner / MicroBT, and is when they make the machine, so they first sell the machine. So they basically sell the futures of that, so of that Bitcoin miner. And then also oftentimes, so they will actually mine by themselves, like for like a period of time. And then so they can actually get the cost back. So I think those are the only 2 type of business I can see can outperform Bitcoin itself. And then so it can basically produce more Bitcoin. And then so if you want to outperform fiat, and I think there's a lot of opportunity, and then so you don't have to invest in crypto at all. And so there's a lot of like good like venture project, and then so you can outperform crypto. So you can outperform like crypto. And so yeah, so like that's basically our like philosophy when it comes to investment.
And yeah, just to add on there, Dovey, totally agree. When you think about the investment opportunities in the space, it's okay, what are people going to build with programmable money? And so by calling it money there instead of store of value, I'm kind of bridging what Leo was talking about and what I'm talking about with the store of value asset. And I think that once you have a widely adopted store of value asset, it starts to look a lot more like money. And its programmability is one of the many features or attributes that Bitcoin has that makes it superior over other store of value assets. Now, what are people going to create with programmable money? I don't know. That's what I'm looking for. That's the reason why we talk to so many companies on a regular basis. And I think that what we've seen over the past few years, once people acknowledged that private blockchains weren't very interesting, that Bitcoin and public chains with a digital asset were interesting, what we saw was a flurry of innovation around people trying to make different trade-offs with these chains. So it was, hey, let's increase speed. So we saw Litecoin. Okay, well, we've tried that experiment for a while, and so far it hasn't been sufficient to overcome Bitcoin's first mover advantage and network effects. We've seen other trade-offs, so other trading off for different optimizations, such as privacy. Well, those have been great. These are all wonderful experiments. So far, they haven't been sufficient to overcome Bitcoin, but they may not necessarily need to. They can be complementary as well. But what I think we're going to see over the next few years is a shift from kind of this horizontal experimentation to vertical building. So I think that over the next couple of years, we're going to see one or at most a couple of protocols emerge as the winners. I think it's highly unlikely that Bitcoin is not that protocol at this point. Anything's possible, though. And I think that what we're going to see is a flurry of people building up the Bitcoin stack and creating, not just Lightning, but layer 3, other layer 2s, et cetera. So those are the things we're excited about.
There are no network effects in store of value. The fact that like this kind of art form is a store of value doesn't make like that other kind of art form not a store of value. So if that's the way that's going, then Lightning is not going to like save Bitcoin, or the Bitcoin dominance index is going to go down. To the
so I respectfully disagree.
Agree, yeah.
And so like yes, like just as store of value store of value traditionally has no network effect, but the meme itself has network effect. And then
brand recognition.
liquidity has a network effect, and
so
liquidity is
like
one of the most
liquidity
important
has network
attributes.
effect. Yeah.
Payments has an insane network effect. I'm willing to accept this payment, what I can easily spend the next time. And that's really something that people need, I believe. People are living paycheck to paycheck, and their family might be a couple of thousand miles away. And often it's the financially most competent person in the family, the woman who is the only one who's able to like read and write often, is the only one who is like able to take on the responsibility for her kids who are living with the father, who have no ability to send the money home without like ceding control to family members who are clearly not as financially responsible as she is. And there are actually some great success stories, especially in Indonesia and the Philippines, together almost, I think, half a billion people, where these local financial systems aren't capable of interlinking with the US or with the Middle East or with Europe, where these people might be working. But Bitcoin is, and this is currently not working incredibly well because of these network effects. And the more we are able to like make it easy, so I do believe that exchanges are like contributing to these network effects, and they are definitely providing a valuable service. But it's a bit disheartening to see that apps and platforms that are trying to make it easier to like buy Bitcoin or sell Bitcoin or send Bitcoin that could theoretically be used by the people who really need this and by the people who eventually will determine whether this succeeds or not as money, that all these platforms and apps are turning into investment products, because that seems to be like an easy way to charge a couple of percent in management fees, and that seems to be an easy way to like raise investment money, for example, when this is not making Bitcoin succeed, and when this is not contributing to the network effects that money needs if it wants to be money.
That's actually a similar conversation that I've had with several people at the conference, is the whole store of value and the use case as a payment today, as a currency today that people can use and interact with, and how there's got to be a balance struck between the two. For the people who want to keep it as a store of value, don't touch it, hodl forever, but other people who are like, yes, but what can I do with Bitcoin now? How can I use it today? Can I buy anything with it? Or is it just sort of a useless lump that I have to leave under my cushion for the next 10 years? And having that sort of balance where there's both happening.
One thing I still puzzle on the medium of exchange versus like SOV, because those are things that are not like exclusive, right? And
no.
So like if we look at the monetary policy, and we have like M0, and we have the base currency, and we have like M1, M2, right? And Bitcoin is just an M0 like of this parallel universe. So like the M0 of this parallel universe. And like on top of like M0, like we can build like whatever like M1, M2 looks like, and then so like. But like we basically need to have the M0 first. And money is a belief system. And so like that's why we have to further strengthen the meme of it, and then just like, so I just don't think that there's a conflict, and then so it's just like step by step.
No, it's not a conflict, it's having balance and always having like people
I think
working
it's
on
just
both
a priority.
ends.
So it's like a priority of like what we should do now. Like just like during this like macroeconomic downturn, and is it more important for people to understand that Bitcoin is like SOV, and then so it's like non-seizable money, and it's like can above like any solvency thing, and or it's just like simply transfer, because that transfer wise like works pretty well, and like Alipay cover like both like Southeast Asia and like East Asia, and then so if we simply want to do like medium of exchange, and I see there's a lot of alternative, and then so that's actually 10x better like than Bitcoin currently, and that's not like the core of it, at least for now.
And on that note, we're going to wrap up our panel. Thanks very much for listening. Thanks, Dovey, Leonhard, and Spencer. It's been great.